Dear viewers, after the massive success of Undertale in 2015, a game the main theme of which surrounds the choices you make and how they impact the dilemma of what is morally good and evil, Toby Fox set out to create his true passion project, Deltarune, where the first thing the player learns is that in this world, their choices do not matter. Now, I could ramble on about what exactly Deltarune is, and talk about all the secret weird endings and character discourse, but if you've clicked this video, you likely know all about it. It is safe to say that last year, when chapters 3 and 4 came out, they hit it off with a massive success. People fell in love with the characters, the writing, the gameplay, and the overall aesthetic of the two chapters, which in turn caused the excitement of the fans to skyrocket when we found out that chapter 5 would release only a year later, the fastest a new chapter has ever been released. However, the question now stands, was spending only a year on chapter 5 a good idea? I want to start with the thing that immediately caught me off guard when watching the trailer for the new chapter, the aesthetic of it. It looked almost nothing like what I expected, having heard the Fields of Pink and Gold or Flower King. Knowing that Asgore was going to be the primary focus of the chapter, I was more than a little surprised to see that the environments of the game were Japanese. I feel like I'm not the only one who didn't expect this. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing against a game visually inspired by Japanese culture. At the same time, I could not let go of the question, why? And I never managed to figure it out. I'm still very confused by that design choice, and I feel like it in no way connects to Asgore's character, his aesthetic, or his narrative themes. The environments in the game, though really well drawn, just felt incredibly out of place. Not only when it comes to Asgore himself, but also the general vibe of Deltarune. However, I think a Japanese-inspired Dark World could work if it centered around a different character. Alphys. Her love for video games and anime is literally one of her biggest characteristics, so a visually Japanese Alphys-focused Dark World could possibly work very well. Back to Asgore, I wish Toby and his team had gone for a more dark garden aesthetic. I think at the point where we are in the game, the darker themes of the story have started to become much more central, and I wish this Dark World reflected that more. I also think going for a more classic old European style castle would fit the style of the game much more and would be significantly more in tune with the Flower King himself. I think a castle garden and a castle overgrown with vines, leaves, and flowers would have been a better fit for this chapter. Long story short, the choice to make the chapter inspired by Japanese architecture just felt like a slap-on decision, not a deliberate, careful choice. However, there were small sections of this chapter's environments that I really enjoyed. The pond sections, so beautiful. I want more of that. That's more or less what I mean when I say dark garden. I really wish chapter 5 hadn't used it so sparingly, as those really were the visual highlights of the game. One of the environments I did also enjoy are, of course, the sunset environments. Beautiful callback to Undertale's true pacifist ending, and a beautiful background for Deltarune. Not too much to say here. They were good, as always. There were singular characters or moments for certain characters that I wish looked a little different, but those were few and generally far in between. One of the first things that I disliked in the new designs was Asgore's initial Dark World design. First of all, I don't understand why his Dark World counterpart is just wearing a regular shirt and pants while everyone else gets a cool outfit, but more importantly, why is the hair on his arms a different color than his beard? It's just a small thing, but it really annoys me. And before anyone says, oh, but in real life, I don't care. In the overworld, they're the same color, so please make them the same color in the Dark World too. Please. Anyway, one character whose design I was unfortunately quite underwhelmed by was Flowery. He is just a guy. Nothing about his design immediately stands out. He doesn't have a particularly distinguishable silhouette. He really is just a guy. Obviously it's not a bad design, but for a game that thrives off unique shapes and wacky silhouettes, Flowery just leaves me wanting more. Another design I wasn't the biggest fan of was Seth. Again, no major gripes, I just had a really hard time reading their eyes, which is not a good thing, because it's pretty important for a character that has eyes to be able to express emotion clearly through them. That's about it though. When it comes to the designs I did like a lot, well, it's the rest of the 7 flowers. I'm a particularly big fan of Green and Yellow's design. Going back to what I said earlier about silhouettes, Green is a fantastic example of how unique Deltarune's shape language can be. They have such a strange shape. It's really perfect. Possibly one of my favorite Deltarune designs in general. Okay, I just want to start this section off by saying the Shiri fight mechanic was so confusing. It took me so many tries to figure out what the game wanted me to do. When I finally figured it out, the mechanic was actually quite fun, but I saw that I was not the only one who struggled with understanding how to activate that act. Aside from that, my main gripe is the fact that it felt more like a platformer than a Deltarune game. Again, I've seen people enjoy the new mechanics a lot, but to me it just felt sort of out of place. Examples of new mechanics that worked really well can be seen in chapters 3 and 4. In chapter 3, the new mechanic was the Zelda-esque video game parts. This worked well since it related to the main antagonist, Tenna, location, TV world, and the characters' backstories, particularly Chris, and the game being a callback to their childhood and their early relationship with Tenna. Additionally, we got some great storytelling through the S-rank room parts, which were just really the highlight of chapter 3. In chapter 4, the new mechanic was climbing, which again made sense considering the setting, pillars in a church, and the main antagonist as it was a way to dodge the knight's attacks. Once again, the gameplay felt connected to the world itself. Chapter 5, however, doesn't do that. The platformer parts are largely just there. They don't feel particularly connected to the world that they're in. The same goes for the Torii gates. They were just sort of placed around the environment a little willy-nilly. I did really like the running segments though, particularly the running on water parts. Very cool. Back to the platforming, I feel like the flowers attacks integrated it with the world decently enough. I just still wish the gameplay wasn't as focused on it, so the game feels more like Deltarune, not like Super Paper Mario. I do just feel like the dev team focused too much on the gameplay and not enough on the story. But I also understand the need for new mechanics, and I'm glad so many people actually enjoyed them. Speaking of the story, the game's writing. I'm sorry, call me crazy, but it honestly felt kind of flat for me. For example, I wish Flowery's character felt a little more genuine, which, speaking of Flowery, I'm gonna go on a little tangent. Why name him Flowery? We've already established that the characters in Deltarune are separate from their Undertale counterparts, except for Sans, so why not just name him Flowey? Or, if you're not gonna do that, just give him a new name entirely. Flowery Loki sucks as a name, I'm sorry. Okay, back to the point. Flowery said a lot of very nice things about his intention and his love for Asgore. It just didn't feel genuine enough for me to really care about his death. Like, yeah, he was a pretty funny character, but he felt like nothing much besides that. Also, don't kill me for this, but I feel like the scenes with Noelle in this chapter were a little over-exaggeratedly written. For lack of a better word, both her lake scene with Susie in the normal route and with Chris in the weird route felt a little fanficky? That's all I'm gonna say about them. It's very sweet that Susie and Noelle finally went on a date and are getting together and stuff, but I just feel like their relationship progressed a little too quickly for me. When it comes to both the normal and the weird route as well, I'm sad there weren't any really big reveals in Chapter 5. Yeah, we found out Asgore is somehow closely connected to Dess's disappearance and Darkworlds themselves, but we kind of already figured that out on our own. The story of the chapter itself was also a little not there. Like, yeah, every chapter is basically just enter Darkworld, seal Dark Fountain, go home, but every chapter carries a valuable moral lesson for the characters. And yeah, I guess the idea that it's unfair they get to keep their little dark world while Flowery's has to be destroyed is a lesson, but I wish it felt a little more overarching. Also, with the amount of side tangents going on, I kept getting confused on what the actual story was. Maybe that's just me and my horrible attention span, but I didn't really have that issue with any other Deltarune game. Overall, this chapter felt less like a story and more like things just happening, which I guess you could argue is a story? I don't know. When it comes to the writing of the dialogue, I also had some issues. 2 repeated jokes in particular did not land for me at all. That being Orange calling the Fun Gang chibis, this especially, just annoyed the hell out of me. And the other one is a very small nitpick, but the fat effing tail joke just felt kinda unnecessary and not very funny. Now, things that I liked about the writing. Despite not connecting with him as much as I think the game wanted me to, I did enjoy Flowery's character. I think the anime segment was really funny, and it confused the hell out of me when I first saw it. I enjoyed his little voice clips, and I liked his interactions with Rousey. Speaking of Rousey, I also really enjoyed how he and Susie started slipping out of their archetypes, possibly relating to how the prophecy may be changing in the normal route. When it comes to the rest of the flowers, I did generally enjoy them as well, particularly yellow, green, and blue. I thought they were all very fun characters, especially yellow, and I love how much his character contrasts with blue, especially considering the fact that they seem to be pretty close. Speaking of the flowers, I also found myself getting a little emotional at their ending segment, even though I wasn't entirely sure what their dreams were. Making Asgore happy, I guess. Now, of course, I don't have nearly as much experience in storytelling, and even less experience in game making than Toby Fox, but I don't really like criticizing stuff without offering alternative options to show what I would have done differently. So here's a section of the video dedicated entirely to that. Here, I will mostly be focusing on the visual aspects of the game, particularly the environments, as I feel like that alone would have made the game even more coherent and enjoyable. Now, I cannot program or do pixel art, but I can kinda draw, so I made some quick drawings of what I wish Chapter 5 could have looked like. The first drawing shows my visual changes to the running mechanic. Now, instead of Torii gates, the characters run through the vined pillars as a speed boost. These pillars would be scattered around the garden area the same way the gates are in Chapter 5. I feel like this small change would benefit the game in the sense that the running mechanic would feel just a little more visually integrated with the world, while still being recognizable as an important asset, especially when compared to the other pillars found in my version of the game. I tried to communicate that dark castle garden idea I spoke about at the beginning of the video, with a lot of green and some blue being the main colors of the segment of the game. It makes it feel tranquil and dark at the same time, which I feel like represents the current state of Deltarune quite well. This section is also very inspired by the lake segments in Chapter 5. I really wish we could have seen more of that in this chapter. The next drawing takes place in the same section, but this time it focuses on the platforming mechanic. I really wanted this mechanic to have an in-world environment-based reason to exist, like the climbing mechanic in Chapter 4, so I decided to base it on the idea of jumping across leaves in the garden to get around the map. I feel like this ties the mechanic to the base game a little more, and sure, it can still be activated using the mysterious structures. I'm not the best at coming up with game mechanics, so I'll let you guys decide on that one. I also really think giving the chapter a somewhat consistent color palette, the way the other chapters do, would have been really helpful for giving it some more visual clarity. Chapter 1's color palette is red and purple, Chapter 2's color palette is mainly cyan with some green, Chapter 3's is yellow and red, and 4's is mainly navy blue. I think giving Chapter 5 a distinct green-blue color palette would have been a really good idea. I also made a little sketch of what the early parts of the Dark World could look like with that color palette. I feel like it reflects the idea of the first journey even better than the purple grass, as it's almost a direct opposite to the red found in the first chapter. However, lo and behold, a twist on the color palette idea. Unlike the previous chapters, Chapter 5 now has two distinct color palettes, green and blue and pink and gold. That's right. For this drawing, I decided to design the promised and never received field of pink and gold. Speaking of which, we never did end up getting that Inferno of Jealousy either. For this section, I took some inspiration from the sunset environments, while also adding the flower field that we could have gotten in Chapter 5. I also wanted to show the flower castle in the background, as this section nears the end of the chapter, once the Lancer fan club finally exits the dark castle garden. This drastic difference marks a change in tone from a more mysterious one to one of clarity and understanding that the chapter's journey is coming to a close. This is also represented by the sunset itself, being a metaphor for that closing of the journey. Now, when it comes to the castle itself, I just made a quick sketch of the entrance. I really wanted to push that journey's end somberness even more and create some tension for possible upcoming events. Potential Asgore fight. I'm not saying it should have happened, I'm just saying it could have happened. I wanted this entrance to have some super dramatic lighting, really saying something big is about to happen. I also wanted this room to be a slight homage to the ruins entrance in Undertale. I just thought it would be kinda sweet. I know some of you may be thinking that a regular European castle would be too similar to Chapter 4's church setting, but that's exactly why the visual focus of the castle would be on its decrepitness and plant overgrowth. While yes, it is a new Dark World, I think that an old, broken down appearance would reflect the state of Asgore's mind pretty well. How torn he is by what happened, and how he might slowly be losing his mind over it. Okay, so that's all I really have to say about Deltarune Chapter 5. It wasn't bad, it just fell out of place and didn't wow me either with its aesthetics, writing, or gameplay. It really sucks to be a bit disappointed by the new chapter after the absolute masterpiece that chapter 4 was. Going from a 10 out of 10 to a low 7, high 6 is really a shame, especially considering how good Toby Fox's projects always are. I absolutely love Deltarune, and I love Undertale even more. It's my favorite game ever made, so this video isn't meant to be hate, but instead constructive criticism. If you guys would be interested in hearing my review of Chapter 4, please do let me know. Toby Fox, if you see this, I love your work. You're incredibly talented and I wish you all the best. And the same goes for you guys. I hope you have a great day. Kind regards, Banshee.